The air in the courtroom is colder than it has any right to be, stinging my lungs with each shallow breath. It smells of old paper, stale coffee, and something else, something like fear, maybe desperation. My own or his? Probably both, though he hides it better. Or maybe he just doesn't have any. He sits across the aisle, leaning back slightly in his chair, a picture of calm confidence. His lawyer, sharp-suited and older, whispers something to him, and he nods, a small, tight smile playing on his lips. It's that smile. The one that used to make my stomach flip with butterflies, back when I thought it was meant just for me. Now, it just makes me feel sick. It's the smile of a man who thinks he's already won, who believes the outcome is a foregone conclusion. He looked at me before the judge entered, just a quick flick of his eyes, dismissive, almost bored. No anger, no regret, just finality. Like swatting a fly. He told me I'd get nothing. He laughed when he said it. A low, cruel sound that echoed in the sudden silence of our bedroom that night. Nothing, he'd repeated, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, a shadow in the dim light. You think you're walking away with half of everything? You'll get nothing. Not the house, not the business, certainly not the kind of life you think you're owed. And now, here we are. The culmination of months of fighting, of scratching and clawing just to keep my head above water. Months of lawyers' fees, of digging through financial records, of sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how it all fell apart. Wondering how the man I loved, the father of my child, could look at me with such cold contempt and promise to leave me destitute. The judge clears his throat, shuffling papers. The sound is amplified in the stillness, each rustle a tiny shockwave. My heart hammers against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate for escape. My hands are clasped so tightly in my lap my knuckles are white, bloodless peaks against trembling skin. My lawyer, bless her, gives my knee a small, reassuring pat under the table. Her face is calm, professional, but her eyes hold a flicker of something I can't quite read. Hope? Pity? Just the practiced neutrality of someone who has seen it all before? I don't know. All I know is this moment feels like the edge of a cliff. One step forward, and I'm either soaring towards a new life or plummeting into the abyss he designed for me. He wants to bury me. Financially, emotionally. Make me disappear. He made that clear. The quiet confidence across the aisle is a physical weight pressing down on me. He believes he has every angle covered, every asset hidden, every technicality exploited. He believes I am weak, naive, and easily defeated. He believes I will walk out of here with nothing but the clothes on my back and a mountain of debt. And for a long time, I believed it too. That's the worst part. The seed of doubt he planted grew into a towering tree of fear, its branches thick with despair, its roots choking the last bit of hope from my lungs. He told me I was nothing without him. And in the darkest hours, alone in the empty house, I started to wonder if he was right. But that was before the shift. Before I decided that nothing wasn't an option. Not for me. Not for my child. Not for the woman I used to be, the one he tried to erase. The judge looks up, his gaze sweeping across the room, settling on us. The moment stretches, elastic and agonizing. This is it. The sentence. The final word on the wreckage of my life. My breath catches. I feel lightheaded, the edges of my vision starting to blur. He's still watching me, that almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. Waiting for the confirmation of his victory. Waiting for me to break. But I don't break. Not anymore. I hold his gaze, and for the first time in a long time, I don't see the man I married. I see the architect of my destruction. And something hardens inside me, something cold and resolute. He thinks he buried me. He thinks he won. But he doesn't know about the seed I planted in the dark, watered with tears and fueled by fury. He doesn't know that some things thrive when buried. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know, and it helps bring more of these stories to life. Life before all this felt like a painting, a warm, vibrant canvas filled with soft colors and gentle brushstrokes. There was me, him, and our daughter, Lily. We were building something, piece by piece. Not just a home, though we did that too, a small house on a quiet street with a big backyard Lily loved to run in. We were building a life together. A shared dream. We met young, naive, full of fire and big ideas. He had the drive, the entrepreneurial spirit. I had the grounding, the organization, the quiet determination to make things work. He wanted to start a business. Something in tech, back when that felt like the Wild West. I was working a steady, if uninspiring, office job. But I believed in him. In us. So, I pooled my savings, worked double shifts, managed the household budget down to the penny, and became his silent partner in every sense of the word. I was the one who balanced the books late into the night while he chased clients. I was the one who proofread the contracts, organized the messy paperwork, handled the logistics he found tedious. I built the first rudimentary website, designed the early marketing materials on our clunky home computer. When Lily arrived, my focus shifted, but my involvement didn't stop. I became the chief operating officer of our life, managing the home, childcare, and still, somehow, finding hours to dive back into the business books, offer strategic advice, or just be a sounding board for his ideas. Our late-night talks weren't just about our future. They were about profit margins, market strategy, hiring decisions. We were a team, a unit. The business grew. Slowly at first, then faster than we ever imagined. There were lean years, tight budgets, moments of panic. But we got through them, together. Celebrating small victories, weathering the storms side by side. We moved to a bigger house, his cars got nicer, our vacations became less about camping and more about actual hotels. He became successful. The kind of successful people admire. The business was thriving. And I was proud. Proud of him. Proud of us. Proud of what we'd built. I wasn't on the masthead, didn't have a fancy title beyond wife and mother. But I knew my value. He knew it too. Or so I thought. He'd say things sometimes after a particularly good quarter. Couldn't have done it without you. Or, you're the bedrock, you know? The solid ground. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband. My partner. The father of my child. Our life wasn't perfect, no one's is. There were stresses, disagreements, the occasional drifting apart that comes with busy lives. But the foundation felt solid, unbreakable. Our dreams were intertwined. His success was our success. His future was our future. My role as I saw it was vital. I managed the home, raised our daughter, provided the stability and quiet support that allowed him to be the driven, outward-facing force the business needed. I didn't crave the spotlight. I was happy behind the scenes, making sure everything ran smoothly, making sure he had the space and freedom to build his empire. Our empire. We talked about retirement, about travel, about leaving the business to Lily if she wanted it. We planned. We dreamed. The canvas was getting richer, more complex, full of the promise of a long, happy future together. It felt safe. It felt real. It felt like everything I had ever wanted. I remember sitting in the backyard swing, watching Lily chase fireflies, the warm summer air thick with the scent of cut grass. He came out, sat beside me, put his arm around me. We just watched her, silent for a long time. He squeezed my hand. "We did good," he murmured. "Look at her. Look at this life." I leaned my head on his shoulder, a wave of pure contentment washing over me. Yes, we did good. We built this. Together. This was our normal. Our beautiful, fragile normal. I didn't see the cracks forming beneath the surface. I didn't see the rot setting in. I was too busy admiring the painting, too trusting, too blinded by the life we had created. I didn't see him changing, not really. Or maybe I didn't want to. The subtle shifts in his demeanor, the late nights that became more frequent and less explained, the way his phone became an extension of his hand, face down on tables, password protected. I rationalized it. Business growth. Increased demands. The price of success. He was under pressure. Of course he was. He was building something big. He needed his space. He needed to focus. I understood. I was the supportive wife, remember? the bedrock. I gave him space. I didn't pry. I didn't question. I trusted. That was my biggest mistake. Trust became a vulnerability he would exploit. My support became a shield he would hide behind. My quiet work behind the scenes, the work that didn't have a salary or a title, would become invisible, disposable. The night he said the words felt surreal, like a scene from a movie I wasn't meant to be in. He came home later than usual, the familiar scent of a bar clinging to his clothes, something else too, a perfume that wasn't mine, faint but unmistakable. He didn't meet my eyes when he walked in, just went straight to the kitchen, poured himself a drink. I was sitting at the table, reading. Lily was asleep. The house was quiet. Too quiet. "We need to talk," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. It wasn't a request. It was a pronouncement. I closed my book, a knot forming in my stomach. This felt different. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with unspoken words. He didn't sit down, just stood there, holding his glass, swirling the amber liquid. He took a sip. Then he looked at me. And that's when I saw it. The coldness. The detachment. It was like looking at a stranger. "I want a divorce," he said. Just like that. No preamble, no explanation, no hint of regret or sadness. The words hung in the air, shattering the quiet like glass. My mind reeled. Divorce? Where did that come from? We weren't even fighting. Not really. Not in a way that felt like this. What? I managed, the word barely a whisper. He took another sip of his drink. "It's over. It has been for a while, I guess. I just didn't want to deal with it, didn't want to deal with me." The implication hung heavy. I felt a hot flush rise from my chest to my face. "What are you talking about? Over? Since when? What happened?" He sighed, impatient. "Nothing happened. People grow apart. It's just time, just time. Years of building a life, a family, a business, reduced to just time." My voice trembled. "Is there someone else?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second. It was enough. The scent of perfume suddenly felt overpowering. "That's not relevant," he said, dismissing the question, dismissing her, dismissing me. "The point is, I'm done. I want out." My head was spinning. Out? Out of what? Our marriage? Our family? The life we built? And Lily? I asked, my voice breaking. His expression softened, but only slightly. A performative softening, I realized later. "We'll figure something out. Custody, visitation. Whatever's best for her. Whatever's best for her. Or whatever's easiest for him." My thoughts were fragmented, racing. The business. What about the business? What about the business? I asked, the question tumbling out. He finally sat down across from me, and this is where the smile appeared. The one I saw in court. Cold, self-satisfied. "The business is mine," he stated simply. "I started it. My name is on everything, but I helped you." I cried, my voice rising. "I put in money, I worked, I handled the books, the website, the logistics, especially in the beginning. I was there every step of the way." He leaned back, arms crossed again. That dismissive stance. "You're a wife. Wives support their husbands. That's not the same as being a business partner. Besides, I've been running things myself for years now. Your contribution was minimal. Domestic. The word hit me like a physical blow. My years of unpaid labor, of juggling childcare and spreadsheets, of sacrificing my own career to support his, reduced to minimal and domestic. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about ending the marriage. This was about erasing my existence, my contribution, my worth. "So you think you can just walk away? Take everything?" My voice was low now, trembling with a nascent fury I hadn't known I possessed. He chuckled. That low, cruel sound. "Pretty much, yeah. I've already talked to lawyers. My assets are protected. The business is set up to be solely in my name. There are pre-incorporation agreements you wouldn't even understand. Paperwork. Paper trails. You know how I am with details." Yes, I knew how he was with details. He was meticulous. Calculated. He'd been planning this. While I was making dinner, packing lunches, helping Lily with her homework, he was building a fortress around himself, preparing to wall me out. He wasn't just ending our marriage, he was executing a hostile takeover of my life. "You'll get nothing," he repeated, his voice hardening slightly, leaning forward as if to emphasize the point. "Maybe I'll be generous and give you a small settlement to avoid a messy court battle. But don't expect much. You'll get nothing in this divorce," he said it like a curse. A final, damning judgment. And then he laughed. A short, sharp sound of pure, unadulterated triumph. That laugh was the real inciting incident. It wasn't the words. It was the laugh. The sound of my life being dismantled, my value negated, my future stolen, and him finding it funny. In that moment, the man I loved died. And something else, something colder and harder, was born in his place. In me. The immediate aftermath of his declaration was a blur of shock and disbelief. I stumbled through the next few days like a ghost in my own house. Everything felt alien. The walls that had held our happy memories now felt like the bars of a cage. The silence felt oppressive, heavy with the weight of his words. "You'll get nothing." It replayed in my mind, a cruel loop. Sleep was impossible. Food tasted like ash. The hardest part was looking at Lily, her innocent face full of trust, and knowing that her world was about to be shattered, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. He acted quickly. Within days, lawyers' letters started arriving. Formal, cold, outlining his terms. Terms that confirmed his promise. Minimal spousal support for a limited time, a pittance of a property settlement that barely covered the mortgage, and zero claim on the business. Zero. It was all there, laid out in stark, legal language. The pre-incorporation agreements he mentioned, the complex corporate structures, the strategic shuffling of assets he'd clearly been orchestrating for months, maybe years. He hadn't just decided to leave. He had planned my financial obliteration. My first step was finding a lawyer. It felt like navigating a minefield. Divorce lawyers are expensive. Their offices felt intimidating, cold. I sat across from polished desks, recounting the same story, watching their expressions shift from sympathetic to cautious as I explained the complexity of his business, the hidden assets, his clear intent to leave me penniless. Some were kind but hesitant. "Business valuations are tricky," they'd say. "Especially when the other party is determined to hide things." Others were more blunt. "He set this up very well," one woman told me, tapping a manicured finger on a stack of his financial statements. "It looks like everything was legally structured to keep you out, proving your contribution to the value of the business, rather than just your support as a spouse, is incredibly difficult without a formal partnership agreement, without a salary, without a title, without my name on any of the official business paperwork beyond early bank accounts long closed. My years of work seemed to vanish into thin air. My value was invisible, intangible, and the law, it seemed, dealt in tangibles. I left these meetings feeling more and more despair. The clock was ticking. He was cutting off access to funds, making it harder to pay for legal advice, hoping I'd run out of resources and be forced to accept his terms. He knew my financial situation, knew I hadn't worked outside the home for years, knew I didn't have an independent income stream or significant savings of my own anymore. Every consultation cost money I was rapidly running out of. The fear started to morph into something sharper, more urgent. How would I support myself? How would I support Lily? The small settlement he offered wouldn't last. The reality of his threats sunk deeper each day. Nothing. He wasn't exaggerating. He was serious. He intended to leave me with absolutely nothing of substance. It felt like drowning. Every time I tried to surface, another wave of legal jargon, financial complexity, or his chilling lack of empathy pulled me back under. He was relentless. He used the legal system not as a means to an equitable resolution, but as a weapon. Every filing was designed to increase pressure, to cost me money I didn't have, to make me weary, worn down, and ready to surrender. He knew my weak points. He exploited them with surgical precision. My love for Lily, my fear of instability for her, my aversion to conflict. He used them all against me. He suggested custody arrangements that were clearly designed to disrupt her life and make mine harder. He used access to joint funds as leverage. He isolated me. Friends who were mutuals suddenly became distant. Dinners I used to attend alone were no longer suggested. I was the difficult one, the one holding things up, the one making unreasonable demands. His narrative was simple, clean, and effective. I was a stay-at-home mom who wanted to get rich off his hard work. My contributions were minimized, my character subtly attacked through veiled comments and selective truths shared with their social circle. It was insidious. It wasn't just a legal battle, it was a psychological war. And I was losing. Every day felt like a defeat. I'd sit in the quiet house after Lily was asleep, surrounded by the remnants of our life, feeling utterly alone and defeated. He was winning. He was taking everything just like he said he would. The house, the business, our shared history, twisting it into a story where he was the successful, wronged party, and I was the grasping ex-wife. My early struggles weren't just about finding a lawyer or understanding legal documents. They were about battling despair, about fighting the narrative he was so carefully crafting, about trying to find solid ground in a world that had tilted violently on its axis. I was in freefall, and the ground was rushing up to meet me. As the legal battle dragged on, the challenges intensified. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to crush me. His legal team was aggressive, filing motions, demanding endless discovery, forcing me to produce documents I didn't have access to. He controlled the flow of information, hiding financial records, claiming expenses that seemed fabricated, making it impossible to get a clear picture of the business's true value or his personal assets. My lawyer, a competent but overworked public defender type I'd finally found who worked on a payment plan, was doing her best, but she was up against a well-funded, ruthless opposition. Every interaction felt like being punched. His emails weren't just about legal matters. They were peppered with casual cruelties, reminders of my perceived failures, sarcastic comments about my financial situation. Still relying on your parents? He'd write, knowing I'd had to borrow money. Hope your lawyer isn't too expensive for your current budget. He took pleasure in my struggle. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was personal. He wanted to see me suffer. He wanted to break me. The financial pressure became unbearable. Lawyers' fees piled up. I had no income. The small amount of temporary support the court ordered was barely enough to cover basic expenses, let alone mounting legal costs. I started selling things. First things I didn't need, then things that held memories. The painting we bought on our first anniversary. My grandmother's antique chest. Each sale felt like another piece of my past being chipped away, another tangible reminder of what I was losing. The emotional toll was immense. I was constantly on edge, jumping at every email notification, every phone call. My sleep became erratic, haunted by nightmares of being homeless, of losing Lily. I was losing weight, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame. Friends tried to be supportive, but they didn't understand the depth of the fight, the sheer nastiness of his campaign against me. They'd offer platitudes, "It'll be over soon," or "Just focus on Lily," but it didn't feel like it would ever be over, and focusing on Lily was hard when the weight of potential homelessness was crushing me. I felt like a failure, a bad mother, unable to protect her child's future, a naive fool for trusting him completely. The business he was so determined to keep solely for himself had been our shared dream. I had poured my energy, my ideas, my time into it. And now he was claiming sole ownership, erasing my history, my contribution. He started talking about expanding, about launching new ventures, flaunting his continued success while I was struggling to pay for groceries. It was a calculated cruelty, designed to highlight the disparity between his thriving life and my spiraling one. It felt like he was building his new empire on the ashes of our old life, on my sacrifice. The world outside my immediate struggle seemed to mock me. Happy families walking in the park, couples laughing in restaurants, their lives seemingly untouched by the kind of seismic shift that had fractured mine. I felt isolated, adrift in a sea of despair. Every legal setback, every evasive maneuver from his side, every cruel email chipped away at my resolve. I started to believe him. Maybe I would get nothing. Maybe he was too powerful, too well protected, too determined to win at all costs. Maybe my contribution really was invisible, worthless in the eyes of the law. The house, the business, the life we built, it was all slipping through my fingers. He was winning. And the thought was a cold, sickening certainty that settled deep in my bones. The darkness grew thicker, pressing in on all sides. All avenues felt blocked. My resources were dwindling. My spirit was weary. There were days I could barely get out of bed, the weight of it all too heavy to bear. The future looked bleak, uncertain, shrouded in a fog of fear and financial insecurity. I was trapped, caught in a web of legal technicalities and emotional manipulation, with no clear path out. The crisis was deepening, dragging me down into a place of profound helplessness. All seemed lost. Absolutely, terrifyingly lost. I was sitting in my car outside my lawyer's office. Rain lashed against the windshield, blurring the already gray world. Inside, the lawyer had just laid out the latest setback. Another motion from his side, another delay, another demand for documents that didn't exist or were in his possession. She looked tired, defeated almost. She suggested I consider his latest settlement offer. It was insulting. A fraction of what I needed to start over, barely enough to secure modest housing for a year, with restrictive terms regarding Lily that felt like a punishment. It's not ideal, she'd said, her voice low. But fighting him on the business valuation is going to be incredibly difficult. He's hidden everything well. And honestly, we're running out of resources. He knows that running out of resources. The blunt truth of it hit me like a physical blow. He had won. He had successfully worn me down, financially and emotionally. He had pushed me to the brink, and I was about to fall over the edge. I sat there for a long time, watching the rain, the rhythmic drumming on the roof the only sound in the small space. The offer sat on the passenger seat, a flimsy piece of paper representing the total sum of my worth in his eyes. Nothing. It was almost nothing. And he was offering it with a smug assurance that I had no choice but to accept. The despair was a heavy cloak, suffocating me. I closed my eyes, tears tracing silent paths down my cheeks. Lily. What about Lily? How could I provide for her with this? How could I give her the stability she needed? My chest ached with a grief, so profound it felt physical. It wasn't just grief for the lost marriage, the lost life. It was grief for the loss of myself, the strong, capable woman who had helped build something from nothing. He had taken that, too, reduced me to this weeping, defeated shell. And then, amidst the storm outside and the storm raging within, a memory surfaced. Sharp and clear. Not a grand revelation, but a small, seemingly insignificant detail. Years ago, when the business was just starting, we were working out of a tiny rented office. It was cramped, chaotic. He was always losing things. Important things. One day, he was frantic, tearing the place apart looking for a crucial early investor agreement. I remember him cursing, sweating, convinced he'd lost it forever. I, calm as always, had gone through the piles of paper and found it, tucked inside a bulky technical manual he rarely used. He'd been so relieved, he'd hugged me tight. "You saved me," he'd said. "You always know where everything is." He'd made me promise to keep important documents safe, to be the keeper of the paper trail. He was too chaotic to manage. He even bought a fireproof safe, a heavy, gray box, and gave me the combination. "You keep the really important stuff in here," he'd instructed. "The contracts, the original incorporation papers, backup drives. My brain is too full of ideas. I need you to be the anchor." I'd taken the responsibilities seriously. I had carefully filed away key documents, made copies of essential contracts, saved backup drives of early business data. Data that predated his careful, calculated efforts to erase my involvement. When we moved to the bigger house, the safe came with us. It was tucked away in the back of a rarely used closet. I hadn't thought about it in years. It held old tax returns, Lily's birth certificate, sentimental papers, and potentially the very documents that proved my involvement, my knowledge, my critical role in the business's nascent stages. The documents he thought were either lost, destroyed, or simply irrelevant because my name wasn't on the official business formation papers at that specific, later date when he restructured things without my knowledge.
He was meticulous, yes.
But his meticulousness was focused on the present, on covering his tracks now. He was arrogant enough to believe the past was irrelevant, or that he'd already purged anything incriminating. He underestimated my role as the anchor, the keeper of things he couldn't be bothered with. He underestimated my memory for details, my ability to find what was lost. The rain seemed to lessen, the light outside shifting. The despair didn't vanish, but it was joined by a flicker of something else. A cold, clear thought. He thought he had hidden everything, but he hadn't hidden it from me. I had the key. Not a literal key to a lockbox, but the key to information he thought was secure or gone. The raw, unfiltered data from the beginning. The contracts that showed my negotiation, the financial records that showed my initial investment, the communications that proved my strategic input. He had built a wall around the business today, but he had left the foundations exposed. And I knew where he'd left the trowel. The realization wasn't warm and comforting. It was cold, sharp, like a shard of ice forming in my chest. He had betrayed me completely. He had tried to erase me. He had laughed. The memory of that laugh, of his cruel dismissal, fueled the ice. There was no more room for sadness or self-pity. Just a hard, glittering resolve. I wouldn't take his pittance. I wouldn't let him win. I would fight. And I would use the very foundation he thought was safe to bring his carefully constructed empire crashing down. The midpoint shift wasn't about finding a silver bullet handed to me. It was about remembering that I was the one who had always held the scattered pieces together, and that some of those pieces were still within my reach, forgotten by him, but not by me. It was the shift from being the hunted to becoming the hunter, from victim to strategist. The rain stopped. The sun, weak but persistent, broke through the clouds. I started the car. I wasn't driving home to lick my wounds. I was driving home to find a gray, fireproof safe tucked away in the back of a closet. To unearth the past he thought was buried forever. The decision was made in that car in the driving rain. It was quiet, internal. No grand pronouncements, no dramatic moment of standing up and shouting. Just a settling, a hardening, a cold, still clarity washing over me. I would not accept his offer. I would not surrender. I would fight him, not with emotional pleas or desperate arguments about fairness, but with his own tools. Paper trails, facts, evidence. I would play his game, but I would play it better because I knew where the crucial pieces were buried. I drove home, the tires crunching on the wet gravel of the driveway. The house looked different now. Not a home, but a battlefield. Every room held ghosts of the past, but also the potential weapons for the future. I went straight to the back closet, pushing aside forgotten boxes and dusty heirlooms. There it was. Heavy, gray, unassuming. The fireproof safe. My heart hammered in my chest, a mix of anticipation and trepidation. What if I was wrong? What if the key documents weren't there? What if they were destroyed or useless after all these years? I took a deep breath, my fingers fumbling with the combination lock.
Click, click, click.
The tumblers aligned. The heavy door swung open with a low groan. Inside, neatly organized, were the files I'd placed there years ago. Old tax returns, yes. Lily's documents. And the business files. Early contracts.
Investor agreements.
Original bank statements from the joint business account we opened. Correspondence that showed my active negotiation with suppliers and clients. And most importantly, a small stack of emails and meeting notes, printed out and filed away, detailing my strategic input, my financial projections, my arguments for key business decisions he had ultimately taken, decisions that had contributed significantly to the company's growth. There were even scans of early handwritten notes, ideas we'd brainstormed together, diagrams I'd sketched out outlining business processes. It wasn't just passive support. It was tangible proof of my active participation, my intellectual contribution, my financial investment from the very beginning. He had discounted my work because it wasn't formalized with a salary or a title. He had overlooked these documents because they weren't part of the later, official corporate structure he'd built. But they told the real story. The story of how the business was truly founded, built on a partnership he now wanted to erase. He thought his meticulous, recent paperwork protected him. He forgot about the messy, collaborative, early paperwork that showed the true origins and the true partners. I sat on the floor of the closet, surrounded by the weight of years, and went through every document. The anger simmered, but it was a cold, controlled heat now. Each paper was a small victory, a piece of the truth he tried to bury. I gathered the relevant files, organizing them carefully. I knew this wasn't enough on its own. I needed a lawyer who understood this, who could use this evidence effectively. The public defender lawyer, bless her, was out of her depth with this level of corporate complexity. I needed someone sharp, someone fearless, someone who wasn't afraid to go head-to-head with his high-priced legal team. This meant more money. Money I didn't have. But finding these documents had reignited something within me. A fierce, protective instinct. I would find the money. I would find a lawyer. I would use every ounce of strength I had left to fight for myself and for Lily. My resolve wasn't born of anger alone, but of a cold, clear-eyed determination. He had underestimated me. He had based his strategy on the assumption that I was weak, ignorant of his machinations, and without resources. He had forgotten that I knew him better than anyone. Knew his strengths, yes, but also his blind spots. His arrogance. His tendency to overlook the details he considered beneath him, details he'd delegated to the domestic partner. The turning point wasn't just finding the documents. It was the realization that I had the power to redefine the narrative, to present the true history of the business, not the sanitized version he had created. It was a quiet, internal shift. The storm inside me calmed, replaced by a steely resolve. He had thrown his best punches, used his most ruthless tactics. He thought he had won. But he hadn't counted on the anchor. He hadn't counted on the keeper of the forgotten paper trail. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, I was entering the fight with my eyes wide open, armed with the truth he thought was lost forever. The courtroom air is thick with anticipation now. My lawyer, the new one, the sharp, fearless one I somehow managed to find and convince to take my case on a contingency basis after showing her the contents of the safe, sits beside me. She is formidable. Her name is Clara, and she has the quiet intensity of a predator. She doesn't waste words, her gaze is direct, and she clearly relishes a good fight. Across the aisle, he is still smiling. That confident, dismissive smile. He believes his lawyer has presented an ironclad case. He believes the evidence of my minimal contribution, my lack of formal business ties, his careful financial maneuvering has proven his point. He believes the judge is about to rubber stamp his victory. He looks at me occasionally, a flicker of something in his eyes. Pity? Scorn? He probably wonders why I didn't take his offer, why drag this out. He has no idea what's coming. 클레러 스탠즈 업, 허 무브먼트 경제적인 퍼포스펠. She doesn't approach the witness stand yet. She addresses the judge. Her voice is clear, steady, cutting through the courtroom silence. Your Honor, she begins. We have heard extensive testimony regarding the formal structure of the business, the distribution of assets, and the financial contributions made by the petitioner. However, we believe this presents an incomplete and indeed misleading picture of the true origins and growth of the business in question, and more importantly, the petitioner's integral, foundational role in its success from its inception. My husband shifts in his seat, his smile faltering slightly. His lawyer leans in, whispering something. Clara continues, laying out the timeline, starting not from the business's formal incorporation date years ago, but from the very beginning, the messy, unfunded, early days. She calls me to the stand. I walk slowly, my heart pounding, but the fear is different now. It's not the paralyzing fear of despair, but the sharp edge of adrenaline. I take the oath, my voice clear and steady. Clara begins her questioning. She asks about the early days, about our discussions, our plans. She asks about my job, my savings. Then, she produces the documents. One by one. The early bank statements showing my significant initial investment. The correspondence where I negotiated terms with their first major client, terms he later signed off on. The printed emails detailing my market research and strategic proposals. The scanned copies of the handwritten notes, our joint brainstorming sessions. The paper trail he forgot. The paper trail I kept. Can you identify this document? Clara asks, holding up a folded piece of paper. It's an original contract draft, heavily annotated with my handwriting, specific terms I'd fought for circled and underlined. Yes, I say, my voice gaining strength. It's the draft contract for our first major client. I worked on negotiating those terms over several weeks. She introduces the fireproof safe documents as exhibits. His lawyer objects repeatedly, citing relevance, authenticity, claiming these are merely personal files from before the official business existed. But Clara counters, arguing that these documents are crucial to establishing the history and true ownership interests from the partnership's informal beginnings, before formal structures were put in place that may have obscured those initial agreements and contributions. The judge, a stern but fair woman, allows the evidence, requesting explanation for its sudden appearance. Clara explains, I only recently located the safe containing these materials. His lawyer cross-examines me, trying to discredit the documents, suggesting I forged them, that my memory is faulty, that I was merely acting as a supportive wife. But I am prepared. I answer their questions calmly, providing dates, specific details they can't refute. My answers are factual, direct, devoid of emotion. This isn't about feelings anymore. It's about evidence. Hard, undeniable evidence. Clara then brings in an expert witness, a forensic accountant she hired, who, using my documents and her own investigation, painted a devastating picture of his financial obfuscation and, more importantly, valued my contribution to the business's founding and early growth in tangible financial terms. Not just as a spouse, but as an active participant whose early work laid the groundwork for later profitability. The accountant testified that, based on the early financial injections and demonstrated operational input documented in my files, my founding contribution represented a significant percentage of the business's initial equity, which, compounded over the years, amounted to a substantial claim on its current value. This wasn't about splitting current assets. It was about recognizing original ownership that had been deliberately obscured. My husband watches, his face slowly draining of color. The smug smile is gone, replaced by confusion, then disbelief, then dawning horror. He whispers frantically to his lawyer, who looks increasingly uncomfortable. They had prepared for a fight about current assets and income. They had not prepared for a challenge to the very foundation of his ownership claim. They thought the past was buried. But I had unearthed it. Clara's closing argument is concise and powerful. She doesn't dwell on his character or his betrayal, though the implication hangs heavy in the air. She focuses on the facts, on the paper trail, on the undeniable evidence of a partnership that existed long before the corporate veil was used to conceal it. She argues that his actions, hiding assets, attempting to minimize my contribution, his own documented statements from earlier years acknowledging my vital role, demonstrate a clear pattern of deceit and an attempt to defraud me of my rightful share, not just as a spouse, but as a co-founder. She argues that the judge has the power to look beyond the formal structures and see the truth of the economic reality, the true contributions made by both parties. She argues that granting me control, not just a payout, is the only way to ensure the business's stability, prevent further manipulation, and protect Lily's future interests, given his proven dishonesty. She finishes. A profound silence falls over the courtroom. The air is buzzing, electric with the weight of what has just transpired. His face is ashen. He stares at me, his eyes wide, uncomprehending. He didn't just think he would win. He thought it would be easy. He thought I was powerless. He thought he had covered every angle. He never imagined I held the key to his past, the evidence of a truth he had worked so hard to bury. The judge picks up her gavel. The sound echoes like a gunshot. She begins to speak. Her voice is measured, deliberate. She summarizes the case, the arguments. She addresses the newly presented evidence, acknowledging its significance in establishing the historical context of the business's founding and the contributions made outside of formal employment structures. And then, she delivers her ruling. She speaks of equitable distribution, of the court's duty to look beyond legal technicalities to the reality of the situation, especially concerning the best interests of the child. She finds that the evidence presented demonstrates a clear, significant, and ongoing contribution by me to the founding and growth of the business. She finds that his subsequent actions and financial maneuvers appear calculated to obscure this contribution and deprive me of my rightful share. And then, the words I never dared to fully hope for. She doesn't just award me a percentage. Considering his actions, his dishonesty before the court, and my demonstrated capacity and historical involvement with the business, she awards me not only a substantial share of the marital assets and property, significantly more than his offer, but full legal and physical custody of Lily, with structured visitation for him, and control of the business. Operational control. A phased transfer of ownership to reflect my proven founding equity and ongoing contribution, with the understanding that its stability is paramount for Lily's future. Control. The word hangs in the air. Across the aisle, his jaw drops. His eyes bulge. The smug confidence shatters, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. He half rises from his seat, a strangled sound escaping his lips. His lawyer grabs his arm, pulling him back down. He is blindsided. Utterly, completely blindsided. He promised I would get nothing. He laughed. And the judge just awarded me everything. Custody, property, and the very business he fought so desperately, dishonestly, to keep for himself. He froze. His face locked in a mask of stunned disbelief. The victory wasn't just mine. It was the truth's victory over his lies. It was justice, stark and absolute, delivered in the quiet formality of a courtroom. Stepping out of the courtroom felt like walking into a different dimension. The air outside was crisp, clean, a stark contrast to the stale tension inside. The weight I'd been carrying for months, years, lifted. It didn't float away gently. It vanished in an instant, leaving behind a strange hollowness, a lightness that felt almost disorienting. Clara walked beside me, her expression one of quiet satisfaction. We didn't speak for a moment, just walked down the courthouse steps. The city noise seemed louder, the sky brighter. I glanced back, a morbid curiosity drawing my eyes. He was still inside, surrounded by his now huddled legal team. Even from a distance, I could see the stunned shock frozen on his face. His carefully constructed world had just imploded. He had been so sure, so arrogant in his certainty that he had won. The image of his face, contorted in disbelief, isn't one of triumph for me. It's sad. A sad end to a shared history. Not sad for him, not really. He made his bed. But sad for the potential that was wasted, for the man I thought I married, for the wreckage left behind. The victory feels immense, overwhelming, but it's not pure elation. It's mixed with exhaustion, with the lingering pain of the betrayal, with the daunting reality of what comes next. Winning wasn't the end. It was the beginning of rebuilding. Full custody of Lily. The relief washes over me in waves. She would have stability. She wouldn't be a pawn in his games. The house was secure. And the business that had been the source of so much pain and conflict, was now mine. Our business, finally recognized as such. It felt surreal. The operational control meant I had to step back into the role I had played informally for years, but this time, officially. This time, with my name on the door. It was daunting. The scale of the task ahead hit me. Untangling the mess he'd made, navigating the complexities, running a company I hadn't been actively involved in at a high level for a long time. But with the daunting feeling came a surge of purpose. This wasn't just about winning, it was about building something real, something stable, something I could be proud of, not just for myself, but for Lily's future. The legal battle was over, but the work had just begun. The aftermath wasn't a neat, tidy package with a perfectly happy ending. It was messy, complicated, filled with conflicting emotions. Vindication, yes. Relief, absolutely. But also grief for the lost years, the broken trust, the knowledge that the man I had loved was capable of such calculated cruelty. The lessons were sharp-edged. Trust, but verify. Never underestimate your own worth, even when others try to diminish it. Paper trails matter. And quiet strength, the kind that endures setbacks and keeps going, can be more powerful than aggressive bluster. I learned that being the bedrock wasn't passive, it was active strength, holding things together when the visible structure was crumbling. My victory wasn't just about assets. It was about reclaiming my narrative, proving my worth, and securing my independence. It was a bittersweet triumph, built on the ruins of a life I had cherished. Walking away from the courthouse, the city stretched out before me, no longer a place of fear and uncertainty, but a landscape of possibility. The future was unwritten, but for the first time in a long time, I held the pen. The cold satisfaction of seeing his face when the judge ruled was momentary, a fleeting burst of vengeful adrenaline. The true satisfaction came later, quiet and deep, in the knowledge that I had faced the darkest moment, found strength I didn't know I had, and emerged not unscathed, but unbroken, ready to build again. Ready to finally claim the life I had helped create. Ready to make sure Lily knew her mother was a fighter. The road ahead is long, filled with challenges I can't yet foresee. But I'm no longer afraid. I'm ready. And that, more than any ruling, any asset, is the greatest victory. Thanks for being here. If this story hit close to home, or if you've ever had to fight for what's yours, I'd love to hear your version in the comments below. Subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life, stories of resilience and fighting back.